let's start the live stream. All right. So welcome back, everyone. This is going to be a similar format to what we saw this morning. You brainstormed a few questions just before the break. And this time we're actually going to hear from, as I mentioned, one of the state economists. That is specifically Josh Lehner from the State Economist's Office, officially known as the Oregon Office of Economic Analysis. So he's sent us a presentation because he couldn't be here in person. That was the person that you requested last time. And that's going to be about 9 minutes of a video that you're going to see here. And then we'll head to Peter, who's here on the line, who will follow up with a few things and then take your questions. So remember, anytime during this time, use the raise hand feature, and I'll be able to see it. The raised hands will just kind of accumulate there. So feel free to raise your hand at any time whenever you think of, yeah, I've got a question, and then I'll randomize the list and we'll come back with questions. All right, I think we're ready for the video.
Great. Jenna, can you make my video the spotlight video? Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Josh Lehner. I'm an economist with the Oregon Office of Economic Analysis, and we do the economic and revenue forecasting for the state. Today I just wanted to give you a couple quick high-level overviews of where we think the economy is and where we're headed in the months and weeks ahead. Right now we're at a little bit of a crossroad. To be honest with you, we're in a deep hole. We're coming out of a very, very severe recession in Oregon and across the country. But things are doing a little bit better than expected, in large part due to federal assistance to small businesses and to households with the income support that we're seeing. But all of that's expiring, right? So we're in a bad hole. We're doing better than expected, but some of this aid is set to expire this weekend when it comes to the unemployment benefit and the like. And so to what extent we get more assistance from the federal government will kind of drive the vote on whether we continue to muddle through until we get medical treatment or a vaccine or get the pandemic under control, or whether we see another leg down in a double-dip recession, which is a growing fear given the pandemic is getting worse and we're not sure about any assistance on the economic side of things. I would point out that there is not a trade-off between the economy and the health side of things. It's not either or, it is both or neither. We won't have a fully healthy economy. We have a fully healthy population and the pandemic under control, in large part just due to consumer confidence, feeling confident enough to go out to eat, to go to the gym, to go to a movie, that sort of thing, venture out and do our normal activities. We won't be doing that until we feel confident and comfortable on the health side of things. So we'll have to make sure that is under control first and foremost, but on the economic side of things, we need some assistance too to tide us over until that vaccine or medical treatment or the pandemic is under control. And that's what I'm kind of here to talk about a little bit today. So the first chart just kind of shows you, we are in the deepest recession on record in Oregon. We have data back to 1939. We don't have the Great Depression in the data, but other than that, this is the worst we have been in Oregon economically, worse than what we went through in the Great Recession, worse than we went through in the early 80s when the timber industry restructured and the like. The way you read this chart is you drop down, this is the severity of the recession. This is the percentage of all jobs that are lost in the state during each recession in recent decades. As you work your way back up, that's the recovery. Right now, we're thinking the current recovery is going to take about 4 years, kind of getting out there around the 2001 recession, that tech recession, the tech bubble, the .com. That's the kind of timeline we think it's going to take to get back. We think we're going to kind of muddle through for the next year until the medical side really improves and picks up on the pandemic. And then from there, better growth, but it still takes a couple of years to get back to health, in large part because we're concerned about permanent damage. Right now, a lot of the damage to the economy is temporary. Right? 80 to 90% of the rise in unemployment in the US and here in Oregon are temporary layoffs. But the longer this lasts, the more prolonged the pandemic is, the more permanent some of those temporary layoffs become, the more business closures we will see. And the more business closures we see and permanent layoffs we experience, the longer, slower, harder the recovery will be. If we can keep most of this pain to be relatively temporary in nature, then the recovery can be quicker. It might even come in faster than we expect, which would be good news. Right now, some of the stuff you're tasked with addressing, regards, how are households doing? And to be honest, they're doing surprisingly well. Given we've seen a record number of job losses in recent months due to the pandemic, and the unemployment rate remains in double-digit territory, households are doing okay because their incomes haven't fallen off a cliff like the economic situation has. And the reason they haven't fallen off a cliff is due to the federal assistance. You can see here, our income forecast has been revised down. We're no longer growing like we thought we would pre-pandemic. We're kind of flat due to the federal assistance. The one-time recovery rebate, $1,200 per adult, $500 per child. The red bar you can see there, and that's about $4 billion in work. That's pretty significant for households. We got that back in April and May, most of it. The blue bars are even larger. That's basically the expanded unemployment insurance benefit, the extra $600 a week for laid off workers. That also fills in a big income gap, right? So incomes are holding up, even though the economic situation has been really bad for the last 3 or 4 months. Incomes are doing okay due to this assistance. So that kind of feeds through. We're not seeing a big impact on consumer spending, right? Income, spending dropped due to shelter-in-place style policies. We weren't going out to eat. We weren't going to the movie theaters and the gyms, and we weren't doing elective surgeries at hospitals for a couple of months and things like that. And so our spending dropped, but now it's coming back, in large part due to the income support. There's some new experimental data from the Census Bureau where they're asking every single week, they're asking households around the country, how are you doing in terms of income, health, employment? Are you falling behind on debt payments and mortgage payments and the like? And so far, they're not really showing much of a deterioration, right? Households are doing okay, meaning a lot of their standard obligations and spending patterns and the like. This is looking at mortgage payments, Oregon versus the U.S., who's on time with their monthly mortgage payments. You can see we've got our one bad data point is last week in the data that just came out the other day, where we had a drop off where we went from above average U.S. average on mortgage payments. This is mostly driven by lower income households that are of middle age or older age. You can start to build a story that this is where we would see the effects of the recession the most. You build a story on maybe this is the start of the worsening trend in Oregon. And the good news is that we're not seeing it on the rent. We're looking at the same sort of concept, but for rental households instead of owner households. And we're not seeing a deterioration in on-time rent payments based on this new data. So we don't know how this will work. This is new experimental data that's only been around for a few months. But so far, it's showing that things are holding up okay, largely due to that income. Whether that support stays and is maintained in the months ahead is something we don't know. And so we're increasingly worried about a double-dip recession. Here's our alternative scenarios we presented to the legislature a couple months ago when we last did our most recent forecast. Pay attention to the red line, our double dip. There could be 2 reasons why we have a double-dip recession in the economy. The first is health. The resurgence of cases in the fall or the summer was actually, right? And that drives the economy down again. Maybe we have to put in stricter social distancing rules. We have to shelter in place more, or people just get scared about contracting a contagious, deadly disease, and they pull back. So there could be the health-generated double-dip recession. There can also be an economic-generated one, where some of these assistance programs to businesses and to households aren't renewed quick enough or strong enough or the like. And so we see another round of business closures and layoffs, which would send us back down into recession again. So this is what we're increasingly worried about, whether we see that double-dip recession or not. I think we're going to start to see the impacts of the recession feed through to the broader economy, where the second and third order effects start to reverberate more. We see more layoffs. We know these quick job gains we've had the last couple of months are the easy ones, going from no bar and restaurant employment to minimal bar and restaurant employment, to going from minimal to a skeleton crew, or whatever the case may be. As we start to reopen parts of the economy, right, we're going to always get some sort of bounce back in economic activity associated with that. Now we're going to start to see see the harder growth come, where we're worried about that permanent damage, a slower recovery in the months ahead, due to all the things that we've been worried about on the economic side of things. So in that scenario, which is still our baseline forecast, I think we will see need for more food assistance, housing assistance, childcare assistance, all that sort of stuff we normally see in a recession that hasn't necessarily shown up to date due to some of those federal policies. I think we'll start to see that in the months ahead, which is something we're very concerned about. Hopefully this has been of some assistance as you're trying to address the questions that the legislature has tasked you with. Here's my contact information. I'm always happy to chat. Give me an email or text or send me, give me a call. If you ever want to talk about anything Oregon economic or revenue related, either now or in the future. Thank you.
All right. We know, I forgot to mention at the beginning of that video that we know that the screen quality there and the audio quality wasn't the best. We did that for a reason though. Instead of playing it directly via Zoom, there's some technical issues with that. And so we wanted to just make sure that everybody could at least wasn't sort of messing up their computer if we had done it through Zoom, as that can happen. So next I want to introduce our sort of in-person economic expert here. We have Peter Holzman, Senior Economist for the Northwest Economic Research Center at Portland State University. Peter's going to talk for a few minutes, and remember to raise your hands using the raise hand feature, and I'll take note of them and then we'll ask a bunch of questions. All right, go ahead, Peter.
All right, let me, could I share my screen? Sorry.
Yeah. Jenna, does he have that ability?
I just got it. I just got
Perfect.
it. Perfect. Can you guys still see me?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, so I'm Peter Holzman, Senior Economist at the Northwest Economic Research Center. We're a university-based center that tends to do policy work and specific projects for clients. We also do forecasting for the Portland MSA, kind of similar to what Josh was just talking about, but he does it for the state, and his goes into the revenue forecast. And so I'm just going to basically hit on some of the points that Josh talked about because I thought he did a really good job. And there's a couple of things that I think could, I could highlight about what he was talking about. And this is based off of something that he's posted on his blog before. And if you look at the economy and you look at kind of the unexpected employment reports that we've had the last couple of months where they've come in above expectations, you'll see that what's driving it is a few specific sectors. Leisure and hospitality, which this is what it sounds like, restaurants, hotels, that sort of thing, retail, construction, education and health services, which might be kind of surprising, and other services. And other services is kind of like your masseuse, your barbers, anything along those lines. And this makes sense that they would bounce back somewhat quicker. And Josh used the statistic that is 80% of jobs are considered temporary loss. Like 80% of the jobs lost are temporary and should come back quickly. And a lot of those jobs are these sorts of jobs. The bigger concern is all other sectors. And this is when you get into manufacturing, trade, transportation, utilities, all these kind of more supply oriented or management oriented positions. And those have not been coming back very quickly. And the concern is that the longer that this goes on, the longer that the demand is not there for different goods and services, and the more businesses that are forced to shutter, that means that it's gonna be harder and harder for those jobs to come back quickly. And this has to do with supply chains. If you think about Intel, for example, which is a big employer in Oregon, they're buying from across the world and they're hiring within Oregon. But if Oregon is more shut off than some of their plants elsewhere, you could see a relative lag in bringing Oregon back versus elsewhere. And this, you just saw this is a couple of things really quickly about this. One is that right now, if you didn't know anything about what was going on with COVID and you saw this, you would pick the faster recovery line, because again, employment has come in better than we expected. Our forecast was optimistic, and it was considered optimistic, I think, relative to Josh's forecast, and it's still coming in better than our forecast. That being said, if I were to forecast today, it would be much bleaker than our original forecast. And it has nothing to do with the more recent employment reports. It has to do with the rise in COVID. And I thought Josh's point about you can't have economic recovery without the public crisis, health crisis abating in some way is perfectly true. And lastly, just a few notes and comments. And I said it a different way, but we're both saying the same thing. And it's that this is a public health crisis first and an economic crisis second. And so as you guys are examining policies, you can't look at something just for the economic benefit without looking at what it's doing in terms of public health and that sort of thing. And a very good example is, I know mortgage and rent relief was brought up, but there is another aspect to that. And it's not just the assistance that is the much needed assistance provided to people who need that sort of thing, but also the fact that it's keeping them in homes and not out searching for homes. And that's just less opportunity for the sort of thing to be shared. And I hit on the point that the longer this continues, the deeper the cuts are going to be. It is the way that it's looking right now, and especially with the industries that are starting to, who have managed to keep the lights on for so long, but now are starting to have to shutter or fire employees or that sort of thing. Those are the industries that typically take a longer time to come back. Your manufacturing plants, that sort of thing. And lastly, I was asked to speak on inequality, and I'm only going to speak in broad consensus because I haven't done any specific research on this outside of the broad economic consensus, and that is that it's a socioeconomic driven. It's nothing to do with genetics or anything along those lines. It's that when you have people with lower incomes and lower levels of education, that tends to go with health risk factors. And those health risk factors, like increased diabetes, things along those lines, tend to increase your odds of a bad outcome for COVID or catching COVID or something along those lines. Similarly, the lower income, lower level of education, it basically explicitly means that your job's a little bit more tenuous, and you might have to go looking for a new job, that sort of thing. You might have to go look for a new living situation, things along those lines. And those are the things that I think will be focused on in coming talks of inequality, because that is really the main thing. And like Josh, if you ever want to contact me, continue to talk about this, that's my number, and you can email us at nerc@pdx.edu. We had a Twitter and a Facebook, but we never used them, so just those two. That's it.
All right, thanks very much, Peter, appreciate it. I'm looking in chat, and once again, I only see one person that put up their hand before. Oh, now there's some more, but let's go to that person that put their hand up already. That's Ken. And can you unshare your screen?
Yes,
so we can
I was
see
just
it?
about to.
Yeah, perfect, that's great.
Peter, thank you. That was very interesting, and I really thought it was well done. But turning to this question about the impact of COVID and social, was I muted doing all of that?
No.
Nope. No, we heard.
Nope. I had a warning on my screen. Okay. On the impact of COVID and social justice. And my question is unfair because it involves an issue beyond Oregon, beyond your purview. But it reflects the economy that right now the Federal Reserve is, in order to try to boost the economy, making money really cheap. It's the only tool they have. It's the only thing they can do. I do not blame them 1 second. But the result is that people who have money can borrow money for nothing. People who don't have money don't get money and can't borrow money. And so the net result of a well-intentioned policy is to exacerbate and to make the problem worse for the distinction between those who have and those who don't. and that COVID is revealing this. And so even people who try to do the right thing end up making the problem economically worse for those who are already on the bottom of the ladder.
You are correct. It's a little bit outside of my level of expertise. The only thing I'm going to add to that is that a policy like lowering interest rates, it lowers interest rates for everyone, and it may have more of an effect on wealthier people, as you point out, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have an effect on others. But other than that, I think that has been a growing source of discomfort in the literature.
All right, next on the list is Tyler.
So I'm going to mention about one of your previous comments where you were kind of saying that, public crisis and health is, when we're making policies, it's kind of a higher priority to put that first rather than, economic gain or the economic problems. I might be quoting that incorrectly, but my question is, how do we, define that, and how do we draw that line to say, okay, our first priority is, public health, everybody, getting healthy? Like, to me, it seems like it's an impossible task to be like, okay, now everything has been resolved. Now we can move on to the next priority. And also, it seems like a lot of people, give you the illusion that it's really for health and for the public. When, businesses, they say, hey, I'm going to donate X amount of money towards this. And really, it is just purely for economic gain. They give the illusion that it's, for the public and we are doing these things. And like, how do we even really determine if it is good for the public? When is it enough for the public? And when do we switch our priorities?
On your first part of your question on the trade-off between economics and public health, it's less so that there's a trade-off and more that they're complements, in that in helping, generally speaking, helping public health is going to help the economy in the sense that it's going to bring back consumer demand, which is really what's been lagging through all this. Again, this is reiterating a point that Josh touched on a little bit, but if you look at places that have relaxed basically the requirements, the government requirements for COVID, and you compare them across, the places that have COVID still present, the consumer demand's not there. People aren't going out to restaurants because they're scared. People aren't going out to the gym because they're scared. Whereas places, it's not that it's the government restrictions or the policies that are necessarily bringing down the economy. It's also the fact that people are scared to go to the restaurants. People are scared to go out. And there's plenty of examples across Europe. There's some across the US even. I think Georgia in particular had, right after they more opened up, it was a little bit, it wasn't as much of an increase in jobs and that sort of thing as people were expecting. And so I would hesitate to say that it's always a trade-off. And there certainly is a point to where it is going to be a trade-off. And that is always going to be a very difficult question, and figuring out exactly what point it becomes more beneficial to people to open up or to do one policy or do another policy is always going to be a really hard question to answer. I just wanted to emphasize the point that in this particular case, a lot of times the economists are following the public health professionals. To your second point, I agree. It doesn't always. There's no such thing. Not all policies are well thought out or will help the public. But that is, I hope while you guys are here to figure out what actually will, and no, it has to be at a policy by policy basis. And that's all I have on that.
All right, cool. Jeff is next on the list. Let's see. Jeff, did you hear me that you're on the list?
There, yeah, there I am. Sorry about that. The word I keep hearing is fear. And we're fearful of our business closes. We're fearful of our lives being in danger. Where do we go as, and then it's kind of a broader for the economy to get us healthy, is to be confident that we can attack this as one person instead of an individual. As a bigger group, we can attack this. How do we band these people together that through all of us, the economy say, hey, look, we got to do this. You know, we're trying to follow the health community, but yet the health community is not sure what we're supposed to do. And the economy's not supposed to sure what to do. How do we start? Where do we start? I guess is the big question to move forward.
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be a politician and not an economist.
Well, just from the economy point,
From the
what would you say to stimulate that economy?
Well, so let's go back to the very beginning. And if we knew exactly what this was and what was coming, and everyone knew and everyone agreed, we would have shut everything down for 2 or 3 weeks, taken that hit, basically taken out trillions of dollars in loans and just paid people off, and that would have been the perfect economic policy, because it would have killed it, and everyone would have their incomes and all that sort of thing, and it would end up costing less in the long run. At this point, I don't know. I think again, and I'm going to go back to the public health professionals, that following policies and that sort of thing that they recommend will likely be the best thing that anyone can do. But again, this is getting a little bit outside my purview.
Thank you.
All right. We have Annette.
Oh, yay, it worked. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question. I'm not sure if you can answer it or not. It's kind of a Senator Golden made an interesting point. He suggested maybe using federal interest rates towards homelessness. Is that even feasible? I mean, how do you think that would work from our housing market? Like mortgage interest rates that go to the federal government? I thought that was kind of an interesting idea and something to think on.
That is, I'd be curious exactly. That is almost as much of a legal question as it is a like economist question. I didn't even know you could do that, but he probably.
I didn't either.
I do, so.
It's a great idea, though. Okay, I just thought, is that even feasible? I thought you might have some idea, so, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. I had to try.
All right. We have Farhat.
Hello. Thank you for having me. My question is that we don't know the future, but we are getting ready for the second wave of the economic downside. Are we taking some precautions on how we're going to get collect finance to distribute to families that are going to be in need, to businesses, or to the public, to community? Are we working on that? Are we doing some future suggestions, or looking to places where we're going to get that economic finance from, and how we're going to get distribute that?
Yeah, so, and Josh mentioned this a little bit. He was talking about how the federal policies have kind of buoyed the households, and they've done a lot over the past few months, and they're set to expire, I think, this weekend. They're looking, and so your question is basically a federal question, because right now Oregon's making budget cuts. They don't have money to spend. It's going to, if we're going to have a boost of government money, it's going to be from the Fed. not the Federal Reserve, the federal government. And so what decisions they make, what decisions Congress makes, is going to have a profound effect on the economy. And that's the challenge of the forecaster that Josh and I both face, is that we don't predict policy. And so figuring out what is going to happen there is, I don't know, is the short answer. I think they're talking about a temporary extension of the CARES Act, which is some of the unemployment benefits and things along those lines. But there's negotiations still going on. So the short answer is I don't know, but I don't know if anyone else does quite yet either.
Are we working on the list, like on some suggestions, some questions are on like, okay, we have federal and we have Oregon. Oregon is going to have their own economic list, so they can already send if in case we will hit the second wave. So out with our total problems here.
So Oregon's mainly at this point distributing federal funds outside of normal programs, because their revenue is way down, as happens in every recession, because people aren't making incomes and that sort of thing. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Sorry.
No. So yeah, our economists are working on our own problem, because federals are kind of don't know what is really happening in our state. So our economists are dealing with our own problems, and we're going to have that list ready in case something hits, so we can kind of help the federal to work on the state problem.
Yeah. I kind of stand it, but I think you're asking about where Oregon economists should direct federal funding. And this is a question we've been asked before too, specifically the city of Portland, their commissioners and stuff. They had to figure out where to, if they should subsidize rents, if they should do direct payments to people, or if they should, I forget the other big one. Oh, if they should subsidize small businesses. And then there's a few other small ones that they were looking at too, which is making sure everyone has broadband access and things like that, which all are very important, and just ranking them is very difficult to do. That is not something I can do. I can do analysis on if you give me specific ways and who's going to receive the money, what I can tell you what that's going to mean for the economy. I can't give you my personal preference. So, sorry.
Right. Let's go to Adair. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Tell me if I'm not.
Oh, no, you did. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for spending time with us this evening. You're very helping us a great deal. My question is for the state, plus also individuals. How would you, if you were advising us as a panel plus individually, how would you advise us to invest, or what can we do individually to start helping boost the economy? Would it be saving? Would it be outspending? I mean, what does that look like if you were a financial advisor advising us individually plus as the panel?
If I was a financial advisor, I'd tell you to save. And if I was an economist, I would tell you to spend. And the reason is that one person's spending is another person's income. And so the more you're out at getting takeout from restaurants or buying gift certificates at restaurants, that's subsidizing other people who then spend money. At the same time, the public health voice in my head says, don't go out to the bars, but maybe buy a gift certificate or something along those lines. That is not the financial advisor's advice, because they would probably, it would always depend on the situation, but normally save.
All right. I see Ken on the list. I just want to make sure that anybody else, because you've asked a question already, if anybody else wants to have a chance to ask a question here, we have a few more minutes. All right. Oh, I see. Lori, go ahead, and then we'll come back to you, Ken.
My question is, it goes to the federal stimulus checks that were sent out. Is that money going to come back and come out of our tax dollars here in Oregon? Is that money going to need to be repaid somehow, or is that basically what some of my friends are calling free money?
So somehow we have to pay it. The way that the federal government paid that check is they basically took out a loan, their version of that. And at some point, in theory, the US government has to pay back that loan. That being said, we have over $20 trillion of debt right now. And there's no sign that we're paying it off anytime soon. And so the way to think about it, this is a debate among economists, by the way. So I can give you both sides of that argument. And one argument is that yes, it will eventually have to be paid off. Maybe not by you, but maybe by your children or your children's children or something along those lines. And then the other perspective is that a nation can always hold some debt. If it becomes too severe, you think of it as an individual with too much debt, they're going to have to pay higher interest rates. And so that would be the way that the US government would face if our debts got high enough. It would be in the form of higher interest rates that we're basically paying to other countries and things along those lines. There's not a lot of indication we're there yet, but it is becoming an increasing concern. That being said, all the other countries have also increased their debt and that sort of thing. And where that money is coming from, in many cases, it's coming from savers. And so the short answer is, if you're worried about increased taxes, specifically in Oregon, there's no indication that it's going to happen anytime soon just as a result of that. It is more of a political question of if people or if everyone feels that our debt's getting too high, they might raise taxes. And in that way, you would have to pay it back, sort of.
All right.
Thank you.
A couple of new folks here. Ken, I'm going to, since you've already asked a question, I'm going to go to them first here. Again, Nancy N.
Hi, I wanted to go back about how you're talking about in a perfect world, if we knew that COVID was going to strike, if we just shut down for 2 to 3 weeks, how that could help us in the long run. I was wondering, I've been hearing that there's going to be a second wave, but there are some people are saying we are currently in the second wave in Oregon. Would it be a beneficial policy to shut down for 2 to 3 weeks now, and if that would help us in the long run, or if that's just a long gone option?
Again, that was never going to happen. That was a utopian idea.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, the short answer is that no, because I think enough people are fed up with the restrictions at this point. If there was buy-in from everyone, possibly, but we're not an authoritarian government, we're a democracy. People have choices, and I think that's going to be ultimately, I don't know how much that would help. There's always trade-offs. Yes, we could, if everyone bought in right now, it depends on if there is going to be a second wave and all that sort of thing. And I can't speak to that.
Thank you.
I've just realized that I've made a little mistake. I too am human, and was looking at my chart here, and it says, actually, I should have been done with this at 7:40. I was thinking 7:45. So we're going to have to say goodbye to Peter for now. I see there's 2 questions still in there. Remember, those questions can be submitted to him. We're happy to do that. And he's put his info up on the screen as well. You'll also get copies of their presentation, so you can use that to direct questions to them. Peter, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. With that, we're going to move into the next section, which is to brainstorm some questions for a survey that Oregon's Kitchen Table, our partner on this project at Portland State University, is going to submit to a panel of thousands of your fellow Oregonians. So this is your chance to sort of ask a question out to the crowd on anything. Now, this won't be a question, we'll just be brainstorming sort of topics given limited time. And I want to invite Wendy from Oregon's Kitchen Table to introduce the survey a little bit more. Wendy?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for all the great work you did tonight. So as you all know, you were chosen randomly and you're representative of Oregon, but as you also probably know is that it's difficult for 40 people to represent 4.2 million people in these questions, in answering some of these questions. So you'll have a chance over the next couple of weeks to ask some questions of your neighbors, of other Oregonians, that might help you think about some of the recommendations you might make. So you're going to spend a few minutes in small groups, sort of asking yourself the question, if we could use input from other folks who live in the state, what kind of input would we use? And we have, Oregon's Kitchen Table has a panel of about 16,000 Oregonians, but we can also send it out to anybody who lives in Oregon. And so once the link is live, it'll be an online survey in English and Spanish. We'll send it to you all, and you can send it to your neighbors and friends as well, and we'll send it out through our networks. And then we'll get the data back, the answers to your questions, and we'll present it to you in a couple of weeks so you can look at it as you deliberate further on some of the questions you might have. And the types of questions usually that people are good at on these online surveys are about their own experience, right? What their own experience has been with K-12, or their own experience has been with rent or their mortgage, the kinds of things you're interested in, but also what they would like to see as a policy matter. So you can ask both of those types of questions. So don't spend your precious 10 minutes in your small groups wordsmithing little questions. We'll do that for you. We just would love to know, sort of what you're curious about as you think of yourself representing these millions of Oregonians. What would you like to know as you're working on their behalf?
All right, thanks so much, Wendy. Your moderators will be taking notes of those topics, and let's head into small groups. I will see you next time because you're gonna actually end in these small groups tonight. So good night, everybody. See you next Thursday.